Hello, friends, and welcome to another video. My apologies that this video is coming out later than intended. I had everything ready to record as far as audio goes last week prior to going away for my bachelor party, and I became very ill and was unable to record audio until today. And so this is a video that has been overdue in my books, and I'm glad to finally be able to get it out to you because this is a weapon that I think a lot of people are going to want to chase in the Mirror Imago, the newest seasonal weapon added in Act 2, and one of, in my opinion, the best SMGs in the game currently. There's a little bit to unpack with regard to that, starting with the Archetype. Bungie has been slowly but surely bringing adaptive frame SMGs back to the forefront, and there is something that needs to be understood about adaptive SMGs. Though they share the same fire rate as their lightweight counterparts, the way they do damage is actually quite different. So, adaptive SMGs actually deal less critical damage, so less precision damage to enemies. I do have a comparison on the screen with the prolonged engagement, the Vanguard SMG from a few seasons ago. But it's a good comparison because it highlights the differences. So what you'll see is the crit damage as listed in the PvE damage profile there is 1122.88 on the Imago, and it is 1153.48 on the prolonged engagement, which means that ultimately over the course of the magazine, if you're getting all crits, the prolonged engagement will do more damage. And because it's the same fire rate, it's going to do more damage and higher DPS. The difference is going to be in the body shot damage, where you see Imago is 654.48 versus 603.36. So when you are not hitting precision hits, the Imago takes the lead. Of course, in any ideal situation, you're going to want to be dealing precision damage. But in a lot of cases, especially in endgame scenarios, if enemies are bearing down on you, you do not always have the luxury to ensure that you can aim down sights and carefully take those shots. That's not a knock on anybody, and that's not to say that it can't be done. There are absolutely players of sufficient talent to pull that off. But being realistic for the majority of players, having that additional body shot damage can actually be a huge plus for players who just need to kind of spray and pray in front of them like an SMG is effective at. It can help you control ads in your immediate vicinity and also help you maybe deal with the quick orange bar or something that pops up behind you and you need to be able to quickly get away. You need to be jumping. You need to be doing any number of things that ADSing becomes less effective. The Imago is going to be a stronger weapon in that scenario. What you also get with the adaptives is an overall higher stat package. So what you do see on this second image is the impact is going to be higher, which is a bit of a false positive there. As we know, they're trading blows. So the impact, don't look at that and say, oh, this gun is objectively better. The impact does not tell the whole story. What you do get with the Imago, though, is a higher base range, equivalent stability. Lightweights are always going to have the handling advantage. That is part of their intrinsic. However, the handling on the Imago is not bad at all at a base of 52. These are all base stats, no barrels, no mags, no nothing. The aim assist is going to be slightly higher on prolonged engagement, but the reload speed is where you really benefit with something like the Imago. Lightweights generally have lower base reload speeds and rely more heavily on reload perks. The Imago does not have that issue. At its base 50 reload speed, you're not really going to notice that it feels slow or anything like that. It's going to feel fine, and it is very easy to fix if you don't want to have to worry about a reload magazine or something like that. You can just throw a reload mod on your arms and it's done. The problem is solved. You don't have to think about it anymore. The magazine stat is going to be slightly lower on the Mirror Imago compared to the prolonged engagement, which, given some of the differences in terms of how these weapons function, doesn't quite make sense to me. You know, if you're looking at the raw impact, if that actually translated to real world damage, I could understand why we're reducing the magazine on the Imago. But given what we know about how it kind of trades blows with lightweights, it's not a huge difference. It's still easy enough to get to that kind of perfect 40 round number that I think feels really good on SMGs. But it's a little confusing to me at this point, you know, given the understanding we have about the differences, why that really feels necessary to me. And then finally, you know, we get a nice 99 base recoil direction, which doesn't mean as much in a world of deterministic recoil, but I will say that the Imago does feel quite good to shoot. It feels very accurate, and its recoil pattern has not felt, you know, egregious to me in any way. So I think it's fine. I don't think you really need to mess with that much. It can get a little wobbly side to side if you're not aware of it. It can sometimes want to band out a little, but for the most part, I found it easy to control, and I found it much more consistent than a lot of other deterministic options that we have in the sandbox right now. When we're talking about what makes the Mirror Imago a great endgame SMG, that comes down to the perk selection. And Imago is a little different than what you're going to find in other SMGs. There are not a lot of SMGs that I truly consider to be endgame. There are exceptions to that. I think the subjunctive with Volt Shot and its ability to handle champions is a good endgame option. I think that prolonged engagement situationally can when it comes to things like Headstone, if you choose to go that route. But the big ones that you will see most players running if they are bringing especially a 900 RPM SMG into the endgame, are going to be the Callus Mini Tool with something like Unrelenting, which is a perk option on the Imago, something we'll get into a little bit in a moment. And we will also find the Multi-Mock, which with Kinetic Tremors and Attrition Orbs is just a great all-around option and one of my personal favorites when it comes to endgame SMG options. The thing that you can get with Callus Mini Tool and that you can get with Multi-Mock is going to be stronger area ad clear. Callus can get Incandescent, and again, Kinetic Tremors on the Multi-Mock is going to mean that you can defeat a lot of ads in a wider area a little more quickly. Mirror Imago does not have any of those particular perks. It does not have an intrinsic perk to it, with the exception of maybe Hatchling, but I'm not relying on Hatchling as an ad clear perk. Situationally within your build, if you want to try and make that work, by all means. What I'm looking at when I look at Mirror Imago is its ability to handle bigger targets, to kill smaller targets very quickly, and chain that into being able to kill bigger targets more effectively. So I'm not relying as much on my special for the orange bars. I can save that for larger enemies when I want to be saving my heavy for the boss, for example. I don't want to have to burn all of my special on every orange bar that comes through when I could just be using my SMG to the same or at least a reasonably similar effect. When I look at Imago, I see two perk combinations that stand out to me immediately, and I believe they synergize very well with each other. So first and foremost, the role that I have been using the most currently has been Subsistence with Sword Logic. And those are two perks that synergize very well with each other. Subsistence, of course, reloads the magazine partially on kill, putting a chunk of that ammunition back. And Sword Logic is a kill chaining perk. Not in the same way as something like Rampage. It takes the strongest enemy that you have defeated and gives you a buff based on that. So if you defeat a red bar, you get 1 stack of sword logic for 5.5 seconds. That is a 15% damage buff. If you kill an elite, like an orange bar, that's going to be a 25% damage buff for 7.5 seconds. If you kill mini bosses, that's 3 stacks, 35% damage for 10.5 seconds. And heaven forbid you can kill a boss with this thing. 4 stacks, 15.5 seconds, which is the longest, as far as I am aware, the longest damage perk, especially at that strength that you can get. It's a 50% damage buff for 15.5 seconds. And what keeps those stacks alive is chaining additional kills. So killing more red bars is not going to increase you to 2 stacks. What it is going to do is reset that timer and maintain that 15%. The same damage buff you're getting from something like level 1 of Master of Arms or from Frenzy, which is another very popular damage perk. So you're getting that 15% right off the rip. And again, if you kill an orange bar, which is a lot easier to do when you're doing 15% more damage, now you're shredding through orange bars with a 25% damage buff. You're killing those red bars just that little bit faster, which means you're proccing subsistence more frequently, which means you're keeping your magazine topped off, allowing you to continue to chain those kills together. It is a very satisfying loop that I really enjoy. I've wanted sword logic on a faster firing primary. I understand it does come on Oversoul Edict, but you know, that's a pulse rifle. I wanted something a little more in your face, like an SMG, that would really benefit from sword logic. I finally have that in the Imago, and it is a fantastic feeling. This is a gun that just shreds through almost anything you can throw at it. I was using it on the moon during the Altars of Sorrow and happened to kill one of the nightmare bosses and got the 4 times multiplier, or the 4 stacks, excuse me, and the 50% damage buff. And it was like I was firing a machine gun at enemies at that point. I was doing just tons and tons of damage, and anything that came out of that, you know, green dome was just getting absolutely shredded by this SMG. And that is an outlier case. You are not going to frequently be utilizing even 3 stacks on a weapon like this. That is reserved for more powerful weapons that are going to more effectively deal with mini bosses and bosses. I want to set realistic expectations. The advantage you have with this is getting sword logic ×2 is relatively easy because you just need to take down an elite enemy, a 25% damage buff that you can continue to reactivate and reset that timer on red bars is a huge boon, and part of why I think this is such an effective endgame weapon. Because yeah, anything can shred on Altars of Sorrow. You can bring any gun you want and kill those ads. They're made of paper mache and glue. You know, anything will kill them. But when you take this into an expert nether, you really start to feel the difference. When you take this into the Court of Blades, you really feel the difference. When you're running an expert rushdown, slaying through those ads, especially in the later rounds, you really start to feel that difference of being able to keep that damage up and get that consistency and that uptime with subsistence and sword logic. The other perk combination that I do really like on this weapon, unfortunately, I have not been able to get this rolled together, I'm still working on getting it, is Overflow and Target Lock. And that is just a perfect combination. Again, 2 perks that really synergize well with each other and make the gun better as a result. So Overflow, of course, when you pick up special or heavy ammo, it overflows the magazine in your weapon. And again, with how easily you can get this to a base mag of 40, for example, you're talking 80 rounds. And Target Lock is going to increase your damage the longer you are firing and hitting an enemy. So as you're doing more and more damage, it ends up being around a 25% damage buff. So when you average things out, it ends up being similar to what we're talking about with sword logic. The difference here is being able to, again, overflow that magazine very easily. If you're using your special weapon, you're able to pick up that ammo. You can continually refresh overflow in this scenario. So now we're changing it. Instead of refreshing sword logic, we're reloading the weapon with overflow. By walking over a brick, picking up that ammo, you're now able to refill your magazine to double its capacity. So you can continually fire, and the longer you can keep on target, again, you're not really going to be using your SMG a lot to kill bosses, mini bosses, things like that. But in situations where you're out of other ammo, suddenly this becomes a really effective weapon to just pull out. Well, I fired everything else. Let me dump my SMG into this guy. It helps with orange bars. It helps with yellow bars. It helps with champions, things like that. It is a nice kind of consistency perk, and it doesn't require you to do anything other than hit the target. So you don't have to get a kill. You don't have to kill an orange bar to be able to benefit from target lock on whatever target you're shooting. And that kind of becomes a little bit of the trade-off there. You're exchanging the speed at which you can get the perk for being able to use it in a more neutral game scenario. There's no conditional setup for target lock other than just aim at and hit the enemies in front of you. So if you are looking for more of a boss killing build and you need a primary to go with that, target lock can be a great option for you, and this would be an excellent gun to have for that. As far as other combinations are concerned, we do have Grave Robber and Swashbuckler, which is another great synergistic perk combination. Defeating enemies with melee overflows the magazine, and Swashbuckler will proc 5x off of a melee kill. So you're really just feeding your melee into your weapon effectiveness. It is a higher overall damage perk when you get to 5 stacks at 33.3%. So if you are running a melee heavy build, Imago is a must-have as far as I'm concerned, just to be able to throw that on there, get that big damage perk right off the rip, and again, use it just to slay your enemies. You don't necessarily need to have Grave Robber. Subsistence will also synergize very well with Swashbuckler, and Overflow will as well. That's kind of the nice thing about a lot of these third column perks. Even Pugilist, for example, with Swashbuckler could be a great option there, is there's not really a wrong answer for how you want to combine these. In the fourth column, we also have Unrelenting, which I mentioned before. So that heals you upon defeating enemies. So defeating 3 minor combatants gives you healing. Defeating mini bosses or elites gives you healing right off the rip. It is a great survivability perk just for kind of using your gun. So if you are in content where you find yourself taking a lot of damage, you might be dying more frequently, and you really need that additional uptime, Unrelenting is a great perk to just kind of continue to slay out and give yourself additional survivability. I know folks currently aren't really high on the recycled energy perk. There's differing opinions on its effectiveness. Having used recycled energy when I was testing out the palindrome when I got that, I actually do like the perk. Reloading after defeating targets grants energy to your lowest charged ability. It is, in the same vein as something like a Wellspring. It's not going to be as effective as a Pugilist, as a Demolitionist, as a Strategist, those focused perks like that. But recycled energy is just a free way to get more ability energy for using your gun the way you were going to use it anyway. So stacking those kills, reloading, it does give you a stacking benefit. And I think it's a good neutral game perk. If you don't get something like Subsistence, like Overflow, I would not be upset with recycled energy, though I do understand currently there is a bug where if you enhance recycled energy, it stops working. So I would keep an eye out for that. You might not want to enhance that currently until that is addressed. While we're on the topic of perks, I do just want to say that this weapon does seem to have some pretty good PvP viability. Specifically in the third column, you do have perks like To the Pain, Moving Target, and again, Recycled Energy, which more ability energy in the Crucible is kind of always a win. Combine that with the fact that Target Lock was recently unnerfed on SMGs, making it a very powerful PvP perk once again on a archetype that does better with body shots than lightweights, can be very helpful in the Crucible. Target Lock is a very appealing perk in that scenario. And again, Sword Logic is going to be another great option. You're going to get that 15% damage buff on the first 2 stacks in PvP. And then if you do kill a Guardian in their super, you will actually get the 50% buff now, which was the change they made there. That's a huge change. You also have Offhand Strike, which increases the hipfire usability of the weapon after a kill. Again, in the Crucible, things are happening fast. That can be a very positive addition to your arsenal if you're running double primary, for example, which is more popular these days than it has been. I have seen a handful of people using this in the Crucible. I've been killed by it a few times. Was surprised to see, oh wow, people are using Mirror Imago. It seems to be pretty good. I haven't seen any Peacekeeper Titans running around with it or anything, so it doesn't seem to be the new Immortal or anything like that. But definitely keep an eye out. If you get a role that looks like, hey, this might be good in PvP, it probably is. The last thing I want to touch on is the origin trait or origin traits when you start getting into the different ways that this weapon can drop. So the base level Mirror Imago comes with the origin trait Willing Vessel. Dealing damage or defeating targets with this weapon gradually grants increased stability, handling, reload speed, and charge rate. This effect gradually decreases over time, but is gained more quickly while near allies. That is a great neutral game origin trait. Things that reward you for using the weapon as you would use it. It doesn't ask you to go out of your way to do anything specific. It's just telling you, use this gun will get better. That's a win. That's a great origin trait as far as I'm concerned. Is it the best origin trait? No, probably not. But it is one you don't have to think about, which is sometimes the best kind of origin trait. It's just always passively working for you, and that is something that every player benefits from in that scenario. When you get players call them shiny, they are masterworked versions of either the base or adept version. These are versions that drop as a masterwork. It is not something that you enhance. It has to drop masterworked for you to get the second origin trait, which is Runneth Over. Runneth Over, fittingly enough, is the King's Fall origin trait, the Oryx Raid, and reloading near allies overflows the magazine. I was not the biggest fan of much of the King's Fall arsenal. I never really fell in love with many of those guns, and so I did not spend a lot of time using Runneth Over, with the exception of Zowlies. So having this origin trait on an arsenal of weapons that I generally do enjoy this time around, with the weapons we get from the Nether and from the Court of Blades, being able to take advantage of this origin trait is actually very nice. So just being near allies, you can reload and overflow your magazine by a maximum of 50% based on the number of allies nearby when you do that reload. The interesting thing with that is Runneth Over increases your magazine size, which helps with something like target lock. And, pairing that also with something like overflow means that you could have a huge amount of uptime on this weapon. So reloading near your allies can give you a nice deep magazine, which you can use to slay out like a mini boss or something like that. They drop a special break, you pick it up, now you're back up to 80 rounds. It can be a lot of fun to just constantly have this deep machine gun-esque. You're taking the sub out of the machine gun, and you feel like you're firing forever, which is a great feeling. I do think Runneth Over benefits some other weapons in this arsenal more than it benefits Mirror Imago, but it is not a... There is no downside to having this origin trait as an option. And you're going to decide if you want the passive stat boosts, you go with Willing Vessel. If you're less concerned with that, there is no downside to having more rounds in your magazine because there's no perks on here that require a reload to activate. So having more rounds is just more better. Now, an interesting consideration that you have here is with regard to mods. It is very easy to decide to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to throw a backup mag on here because that's going to give me a deeper magazine. That's going to benefit Runneth Over. That's going to benefit Overflow. That's going to benefit Subsistence. It's going to benefit so many of those things. And that is totally fair. You might want to put a ballistics mod on there just to get that slightly better range, slightly better stability, make it feel better. You probably want to put an ammo finder mod on here. What I like, and there's two ways to go about this. The limited time mods that we have from this episode, the Power of Ambition, Armaments of Ambition, and Willbreaker Munitions are super cool. And you should probably play with those while you can. I'm a weirdo, and I don't always like taking advantage of the kind of false power that comes with some of this stuff. And when you have a limited mod like that, its appeal isn't really high with me because I don't want to get used to the gun working or feeling a certain way just to have that taken away from me later and then perhaps like the gun less. I'm already scared with Reckless Oracle. I don't need another reason on something like Mirror Imago. What I really like on here is the Synergy mod. And the reason being is because this is a strand SMG, you are going to generate tangles when you proc Synergy. The benefit of that is obviously being able to pick up and throw the tangle, but also be able to shoot and destroy that tangle, which compensates for the lack of an area ad clear effect. So you could spawn a tangle in the middle of a group of ads, destroy that tangle, wipe that group of ads very quickly, very effectively. And then you're just waiting for that cooldown. It is 12 seconds for a tangle. But the upside is you're getting a more effective area ad clear option. And so personally, I'm running Synergy on there and taking advantage of that, similar to kind of what I was doing on my prismatic build when I was running the perk that you deal precision damage and you unravel enemies, which creates tangles. I really like that gameplay loop on prismatic. Being that I am playing Arc, being a Titan, in this episode, I don't get that benefit anymore. And this gives a little bit of that back to me. And so I don't miss Prismatic as much because I can still make tangles and have that fun gameplay loop via the Synergy mod. So definitely give that some thought. It's scoring 12 weapon kills, the elemental pickup based on the elemental or the element of the weapon is how that perk works, or the mod, excuse me. And I think it's maybe still my favorite of the new mods that they introduced with the final shape, and I would definitely recommend at least giving it a try and see if it's your thing. Folks, thank you so much for watching. This video actually went a little longer than I thought it would, but there's a lot to unpack with the Imago. There's a lot to talk about and a lot to consider. I do appreciate you taking the time if you've watched this far. I am going to be getting married soon, and so my schedule is a little up in the air at the moment. I do want to have a video potentially for Lotus Eater before I do get married in about 2 weeks, so I will do my best to get that out for you. I am still trying to stream when I can on Twitch, twitch.tv/nightmarecv. If you guys could come out, say hi, I would appreciate it ever so much. But as always, thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, you know what to do. and I will catch you on the next one. Bye bye.